All right, welcome everybody. So today we've got another episode of the the Universal Man interview series. I was about to say Man of Action, my other series, Universal Man interview series. And today we are joined by Siim Land. And I'm saying that right, Sim? Is that right?
It's more like Siim, but
Siim.
Siim is also fine.
Oh, sorry. should have probably figured that out off air beforehand. But I appreciate Siim coming on, and he's kind of an expert on fasting, and I want to make sure that I'm bringing on a diverse group of guests and whatnot. But I think that one of the big places that guys struggle today is they don't know what to eat, how to do it, because there's so many different conflicting views about how you should approach this kind of stuff. And it seems like you've got a pretty good handle on things, and so I figured I'd kind of just talk to you about what's going on with all this fasting stuff. Some people are crazy about it. Some people promote the exact opposite, and just figured I'd walk through it. How's that sound?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So before we dive into that, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your story and what you're all about?
Well, I am primarily an author as well as a speaker who does just content about biohacking and health optimization and increasing your performance and those sort of things. But my own kind of why I got into this was just my own personal interest in trying to optimize my fitness, my cognition, my productivity, and just general success. So kind of incorporating these different strategies, like fasting being one of them. I just started sharing these topics with other people, and then kind of grew out of that. So I've been doing, let's say, content creation and writing for about 4 to 5 years, and I've been involved in just optimizing my health and body for maybe around 7 years and such. So I've been just deep into the topics that we're gonna talk about shortly.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Like, that's actually a similar kind of timeline for me. It's like, that's when I got on YouTube around 7 years ago, and had my big awakening around a lot of the self-development stuff. Even though I'd been, looking at it for a while longer, it's just, it takes a while for you to really accumulate the experience. You get a lot of, trial and error underneath your belt. So it's cool to hear that you've had a lot of experience with this kind of stuff. How old are you at this point, if you don't mind me asking?
25.
25. Wow. Okay. So you got into this younger than I did. I just turned 30. So awesome. Now, when you're talking about biohacking, that's kind of a diverse sort of range of topics there. What would you say falls under that? Like, what are the big components around biohacking?
Yeah. Well, the way I define it is just optimizing your body and mind as well as your environment to reach a particular goal, whether that be improved health, whether that be increasing lifespan, whether that be improving your productivity or cognition, or just controlling certain states of mind, so to say. So you can apply this to a whole different types of fields. Like, you can use it for burning fat, improving body composition. You can use it for life extension. You can use it for just being more productive during daytime. So it's very applicable to many areas of life. And usually people, when they say biohacking and they describe what kind of activities they do, then it usually involves things like diet, exercise, meditation, taking some supplements, taking a sauna, taking some
Right.
ice baths, doing some breathing exercises, as well as just using some technology like tracking their sleep, tracking their steps, blocking certain apps on their phone or whatever it is.
Right.
Like, I myself would categorize them all as biohacking, because
Yeah.
they're controlling, or they're changing some of your physiological states, and you're also reaching certain results with that. So like, if a person is just, I don't know, like eating healthy, then they're not really a biohacker. But someone who is doing it deliberately and actually paying attention to their food and being mindful of it, or specifically tailoring their nutrition to their genes or their biomarkers, then that's a biohacker, because they're more like involved with the data,
Hmm.
and they're actually like quantifying certain aspects of what they eat.
That's really cool. That's really interesting. So it's like I've taken kind of the more, I guess you say, the internal route of personal development, really obsessive over the mindsets, the the perspectives, the mental habits, that kind of stuff. And that's where I've kind of built my niche. And I've messed around a little bit with the biohacking. I bought a ton of different nootropics and tried those things out, but I don't think I've gone nearly as far as you have in the actual physical realm. So just kind of looking at that, what would you say are the biggest variables that, like, if adjusted properly, provide the biggest bang for your buck in terms of biohacking? Are we talking like, do you want to track your macronutrients? Is it hours of sleep? Is it, total caloric intake? Is it caloric timing? Like, what are the big levers that someone who wants to get into biohacking should look at optimizing first?
Yeah, that's a good question, an important one, because you can get into the weeds of trying to take some random supplements without really getting any
Right.
benefit from it, just because you don't have like the fundamentals optimized. So definitely the fundamentals and the most easiest things are getting enough sleep, getting your exercise on point, eating the right foods, not becoming obese and such. So you kind of have to bring your body into this homeostatic balance where it functions the best at, and that involves having like this somewhat semi-lean body composition with sufficient amounts of muscle mass, then getting like enough sleep, which usually tends to be around 6 to 8 hours for most people. And of course, like the quality of that sleep is also very important. The length of it isn't that as vital for like cognition and health. Like you can get away with sleeping only like 6 hours or even less in some situations if it's like really good quality sleep, versus you can sleep up to 10 hours and not really be fully rejuvenated from it. So
Hmm.
the quality of sleep is a lot more important than the length of it. But yeah, generally just get enough sleep and not experience like sleep deprivation and poor sleep symptoms. Then in terms of diet, like you have to eat uh, usually around like your maintenance calories. Tend to be like you don't want to be under eating all the time, but you don't want to be overeating either. So you kind of again find some sort of balance. But some short periods of calorie restriction or some fasting, they can have like a positive effect in terms of like creating this chaos in your body, because small amounts of stress is actually beneficial in the long run because it kind of makes
Right.
your body stronger. But
Right.
again, chronic stress and too much stress is not ideal. So again, it goes back to finding some sort of a balance. But the balance itself is never like stagnant. You're never completely still. You're
Mm.
fluctuating between chaos and this chaos and order. Like you go into during exercise, you're really draining your energy, but then you allow your body to recover during sleep and eating. So yeah, it's like the extremes, polar opposites, tend to be where the biggest effect comes from.
Right, and that's a really awesome point, and it sounds like there's a little Petersonian sort of vibe to that chaos and order balance. But like that's what I talk about a lot with people in their lifestyle shifts. It's like you can only take on so much stress at once. Like if you're trying to quit porn and you're a porn addict, that's not the time to do a total body recomposition, and it's not the same. Like people, they get pumped about some kind of path of progress, and they say, oh, all right, since I'm pumped, I'm gonna capitalize this. I'm gonna do everything all at once. And so, what do you think of that strategy? How well would that work?
Right. Well, I think it depends on the person. Like some people may find it difficult because their like willpower tends to deplete, and they get like cognitive dissonance or just overwhelmed by the amount of restrictions they put on themselves. Whereas some other people may thrive under those conditions. So it's a personality type of thing.
Hmm.
Usually, I wouldn't like if I were to try to consult with someone, then I wouldn't throw everything into the kitchen sink, so to say. I wouldn't put all the new biohacks into their schedule. I would start off with like some fundamentals, like establishing like a consistent sleep wakefulness routine of going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time, as well as trying to incorporate like exercise, in some shape or form almost daily, and making sure that the meals are on point, so to say, that you want to build like these certain habits that initially may require some discipline and willpower, but after a while they've become like automatic and habitual. So that's the point where you want to reach. You don't want to
Right.
actually constantly exert willpower on like staying clean on your diet or doing the exercises. You want to reach a point where you're doing it just because you like to do them, just because they make you feel better, and just because they're just a part of you as a person almost.
Right. And then at that point, your willpower is freed up, and then you can take on new tasks and challenges, right? So you're making sure that you constantly find that balance, that budget where you're trying hard, you're pushing yourself into, that realm of chaos, of, discomfort, but making sure that you're doing it in a controlled way so that everything else doesn't fall apart, and so that you can actually have the adaptation. Because if there's no adaptation, then what you're doing is just a flash in the pan, and maybe you get some benefits from it in the moment, but then it's gone, and because you haven't internalized it, you haven't integrated it, right?
Yeah,
So you mentioned something about, in terms of like the big metrics, and you're talking about being relatively lean. Now, obviously, being lean has an aesthetic advantage. Most people, they want to look leaner. They don't want to have a whole bunch of excess body fat. But does this actually do anything for you in terms of your overall health and performance and whatnot, beyond, I guess, just like having to carry around less weight?
well, certainly there's a and you don't necessarily have to be lean to be healthy, and being lean doesn't necessarily mean that you're healthy.
Right.
So it's just that usually being somewhat leaner helps to create this environment in your body where it can be healthier, so to say. So your biomarkers would be more optimal, so to say. So if you're let's say carrying too much excess body weight, then your adipose tissue and fat tissue, it functions almost like an endocrine organ,
Hmm.
and it does create it will affect your hormones, and it will affect other aspects of your metabolism, so to say. So usually, like for instance, if a man is obese, then their testosterone also tends to be lower, as well as their their triglycerides would be higher, their blood sugar may be higher as well, and they may be semi-insulin resistant. So it's like a chicken
Hmm.
and egg problem.
Right.
Like they are insulin resistant because they're obese and they're carrying extra weight, while at the same time, that is also creating the initial problem. So usually, just being lean would mean that you got your diet and exercise on point. It's almost like a side effect of doing the right things.
Right.
And carrying a bit more muscle mass is also very useful, because muscle is also like an organ almost, that just improves your hormonal profile, improves your metabolic flexibility, and it also just makes it more convenient to survive in the modern world where food is abundant. So your body's going to just burn more calories at rest without you needing to like go out and run a marathon and do a bunch of cardio. So yeah,
Right.
like, it just makes your body healthier in general.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, like this, though, it obviously there's a bound to this. There's a point where if you become so lean, it actually starts crashing your hormones. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. And when does that threshold happen? It's also like very dependent on the person
Hmm.
and some other variables of their life. So if you're going to crash diet and you go like from 20% body fat into 10% body fat really fast, like within 1 to 2 months, then you may just rebound because your
Hmm.
body isn't used to being that lightweight, so to say. And you have to kind of, the body it strives to be in this balance, so to say. And if you're very used to being at a certain threshold of body weight, then it's going to take like a longer period of time for you to get used to being lighter weight, and
Sure.
it will take some time for you to readjust these inner metabolic homeostatic processes, so to say. But it's still possible, and yeah, usually it would
So, what kind of
just
timeline should someone like think about? Like, say they want to lose, you know, 20 pounds, okay? Or maybe it'd be better to do body fat percentage is kind of tough. A lot of people don't measure that. Let's just say they wanted to lose like 20 pounds or something like that. Okay. What would you recommend in terms of a timeline for someone to go about doing that?
well, 20 pounds. Well,
I guess it
if
depends
it's
on what their body fat percentage is,
yeah,
doesn't it?
their starting weight has to be taken into account, because if someone is already, let's say,
Fairly lean.
very overweight, then losing 20 pounds for them is very easy and
Right.
takes
Right.
much less time. Versus someone who is already like pretty lean, and losing 20 pounds for them is much more difficult, and may take some longer time. So, but usually I would suggest that you know you could lose the fat faster if you're putting more like creating a larger calorie deficit on yourself through either exercising more or eating less. But at the same time, you can pay attention to things like your mood, your
Hmm.
your sleep, your exercise performance is also a good indicator
Uh,
of how well you're doing, or how's your hormonal status, so to say. So you wouldn't want to crash your hormones by losing weight. But if you do it gradually, then you can safely like maintain adequate testosterone, and you may actually increase your hormones and testosterone by losing weight, because you
That's a
get like
great point there. So instead of like trying to work out a complex formula with like body fat percentages and starting weights, you can kind of just auto regulate. If you find yourself getting really weak, your exercise performance going down significantly, your mood going really off the rails, and that's probably a sign that you're going a little bit too hard, too fast. Is that right?
right.
Okay.
Yeah. And well, it's a good strategy, but at the same time, those things are to be expected to a certain extent. Like, you can't expect to lose a bunch of weight and get a six pack without, in some shape or form, affecting your performance. So if you're eating a whole lot of more calories, then you will inevitably have like more strength and more explosiveness and such. So it is to be expected to a certain extent, but you shouldn't completely, go crazy with it and be kind
Right.
of mindful. And you can mitigate those effects by trying to not, if you do experience like, okay, I'm weak, I'm gonna binge because I want to, either regain my strength or trying to quote unquote boost my metabolic rate or something, which is not like a good strategy. You don't want to go like the other end of the spectrum, from being like very severely restricted to into complete binge mode. You may want to like take a small break with your diet, have one day or a few days where you eat like normally a bit more calories, and that would be like enough. But you would never want to completely go to the other end of the spectrum and do the opposite of trying to lose weight.
Why is that?
Well, it's just going to, jeopardize your progress. Like,
Ah,
if you just eat 1000 calories for 5 days in a row, and on the sixth day you're like starving, you eat 10,000 calories, then you're going to just, undermine your entire progress that you achieved so far. So it's never the 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 smarter strategy would be to just, maybe reduce the deficit a little bit, but
right.
still having like a strategic refeed
So
that
basically
isn't
being a
necessary.
little less extreme so that you don't have
Yeah,
so hard of a rebound. Is that right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So let's get into the actual fasting stuff here a little bit more. So why should someone explore fasting over other forms of dietary control, like just restricting the food kinds of food that they have, or just trying to eat less each meal and still keep like a normal to high meal frequency? What's the advantage of fasting?
Yeah. Well, in the past, or the past few years, past few decades, the mainstream advice has been to eat like small meals and snack all the time, which can be useful for like someone who's trying to really maximize muscle growth and, mass, build on a bunch of mass. But for the average person and most people, they don't really need to do that, and they don't really want to do that either. So they
Right.
may find skipping a few meals can actually be just more convenient, but it also has a few unique metabolic effects that you don't get from eating all the time, and a lot of it is linked with things like your chronobiology and circadian rhythms, as well as these other longevity genes and longevity pathways that get activated while you are fasting. And yeah, like a lot of like new research is showing that, just let's say starvation, put it bluntly, or skipping meals and experiencing this hunger can promote these pathways that repair your DNA, that clean out toxic proteins, that reduce inflammation, as well as yeah, like reinvigorate the body to kind of make it more youthful. And yeah, like in the example of fasting, the most of the effect comes from these two processes called autophagy, which translates into self-eating, as well as sirtuins. Sirtuin proteins are like these DNA repairing proteins, and those things can be activated with things like calorie restriction. But fasting also activates it, and it's been found that fasting mimics the effects of calorie restriction without you needing to restrict the calories. So,
Mm.
for example, you can eat the same amount of calories, but if you do it in a smaller time frame, then you're still going to get the effects of calorie restriction without having to reduce the calories, because you're spending more time in this state where your body is fasting and it's fasted. So it's in this like state of zero energy, or energy suspension, and in that state your body is, going through all these processes, these repair processes at autophagy and sirtuins. And once you're eating, then you're going to reap those benefits as well. So you can almost think of fasting as biohacking calorie restriction, that you don't have to starve or you don't have to reduce your calorie intake. You just eat the same amount of food, but if you do it in a smaller time frame, then you're getting like these unique benefits as that is helping your body to kind of clean itself up and extend like your longevity.
That's an awesome answer. Okay, so there's a lot of value in fasting in the sense that you've got this autophagy or autophagy. I don't know how to pronounce it. Autophagy is how I normally say it. So it's like that's where the self-eating, that's where it's kind of like people talking about detoxing a little bit. Is that what's going on? Like the body's going through and it's kind of cleaning stuff out? Is that
Well, yeah, like the autophagy is like the ultimate detox, but you can detox doing other things as well. You don't need
okay?
autophagy to detox, but yeah, like just the liver itself is always kind of cleaning itself out. But the autophagy process directly targets intracellular components,
Hmm.
things like broken mitochondria, different pathogens, toxins, and misfolded proteins that are just spreading inflammation. So as you get, the mere byproduct of existence and living and breathing and eating and moving around, all those things create oxidative stress on your system and create these inflammatory particles that begin to float around. And if you
Hmm.
don't remove them, then they're going to spread, so to say. So
Hmm.
if you don't have like a consistent cleanup mechanism removing those particles, then you're just, you know, um, becoming like a walking garbage bin, so to say. And the problem is that in the modern world, we don't have a lot of cleanup that is happening on a consistent basis. Like most people are just eating throughout the entire day, and they may experience a small or a short fast, during the night, but
Right.
it's not like it's not that long. And given if you look at the amount of toxins and these other different stressors that we experience in the modern world, then it's kind of safe to say that we would need like an additional boost in things that just clean our cells. And fasting is one of them. Exercise is also, especially like high intensity exercise, is also stimulating autophagy. But also like taking saunas, ice baths, they're also good for giving like a similar effect.
That's awesome. Okay. And so, what would be kind of like, say someone goes from a state of being all filled up with all these toxins and all this crap, and then they go through a period of, significant autophagy, and they, what kind of things would they experience? Like, what would the benefits be that they would see?
Well, I think it depends on the person and where they're coming from, what's their current health, and what's their current body composition. But usually people say that they experience just reduced inflammation as a byproduct, as well as just mental clarity during the fasted state. They may like just initially they may automatically lose a bit of weight because of like subconsciously starting to eat less, as well as yeah, like generally feeling, you know m- that they don't have like a bunch of a digestive strain on their system or
Mm,
something. But it's gonna vary between people.
sure.
Some good signs to maybe look out for are clearer skin, better body composition, needing less food to be energized, and
Mm,
not feeling that sleepy during the daytime as well, maybe in between meals or something. Just in the fasted state, usually I just do all of my work, and
right.
I'm not like dependent of stimulants, or I'm not dependent on eating, so to say. So hunger itself doesn't become a distraction. It becomes more of like I don't know, like a thing that fuels me or gives me actually more energy and more vigor.
Yeah, that's something I've definitely noticed too. Is that in the fasted state, you can be much more focused, which I guess evolutionarily makes sense, because it's like, hey, if you're fasted, then you probably need to go get to work getting some more food. So it's like, it makes sense that your body kind of kicks into gear a little bit there, at least up to a point. Now, I wanted to get into a bunch of other stuff, but there's one more thing I wanted to hit on. You're talking about this other aspect of fasting, which was, I think you said sirtuins, or what was the word?
Sirtuins, yeah.
How do you spell
Silent. Sirtuins. They're
Okay.
sirtuin proteins, and like silent information regulators is the long word, and essentially they're like DNA repairing proteins, and they also have a link to a lot of longevity and increased
Huh.
lifespan in different species.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, they're pretty much helping to, they're affecting the epigenome, so to say, the epigenome being standing above your genes, translated, and it's gonna essentially tells your genes and DNA what kind of functions or what kind of processes to go through and what kind of things to do. So
Huh.
elevation of sirtuins essentially kind of stimulates your body's survival mechanisms and helps to clean out the house, as well as repair these misfolded proteins and DNA.
Interesting. So it's like giving the instructions, like, to either break down and die, or to, stay vibrant and young and vital and that kind of thing. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and just making sure that you don't get like some random mutations and those things. So
Okay.
it's gonna tell your like nerve cells to be a nerve cell instead of a liver cell, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. No, that does make sense. And I guess the big benefit I've seen, beyond those kinds of things, which I didn't fully understand, with fasting, is just that it seems to be way easier. It's easier to just not eat than to try and control what you're eating, or to try and eat less. Personally, that's definitely the case for me. It's way easier to just be like, all right, I'm not eating for X amount of time, rather than like having a plate of food and keeping it small, and like starting to eat and then like having to stop.
Yeah, so a lot of people, yeah, experience that as well, and especially when you're dieting, then it can be a good tool for still being able to eat large amount of food, but you do it in a shorter time frame, and it doesn't really take a lot of willpower once you get used to it.
Right. And so, speaking of time frames, there's like all different ways to set up fasting. There's like, I mean, maybe you could go through some of the most popular ones and let me know what you would recommend for someone to start with, who is curious with this kind of stuff, about this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, the most popular method is the lean gains method, which is you fast for 16 hours and you eat within 8 hours. And usually that means that, yeah, you just skip breakfast and have lunch and dinner. And I think that's the perfect kind of optimal zone for most people who want to just improve the body composition, as well as get the benefits from the fasted state. So that's the most common one, and I think, yeah, like that would be something that I think most people should follow. Then there are more more longer fasts, like the warrior diet, which is essentially fasting for 20 hours and eating within 4 hours. And for that, that can be useful for someone who is trying to burn more body fat, or just feels more productive doing longer fasts and doesn't want to eat that often. And then the last one would be like a 1 meal a day OMAD, and that's again depending on the length of it, but usually fasting around maybe 23 hours or 22 hours and eating within an hour or two, something like that. And
Yeah.
the difference probably is you may experience slightly more autophagy with 1 meal a day than with 16 and 8, but the difference is pretty much small as well. And usually, it's just, in my opinion, it's a matter of convenience and a preference, what kind of a fasting window the person would like to do, and how well are they able to implement it into their life. So, because I would never advise sacrificing things like performance at the gym, or sacrificing sleep for the sake of doing some form of fasting window, so to say. So if you see that your performance is dropping, then you should either optimize your diet or eat more often, so to say. So I wouldn't like just hammer one meal a day if you see that you're not making progress, or
Right.
you see that you begin to lose muscle mass, because that I
Yeah.
would preferably prioritize muscle mass more. But 16 and 8 is perfect for getting like sufficient amounts of food for building muscle, while at the same time getting some benefits from the fast state and these longevity genes.
Okay, that's interesting because I know you did. At least I've seen some of your thumbnails. It's like how many years of one meal a day did you do? Like you've done a lot of one meal a day, right?
Yeah, like for the last 4 years, I've been doing primarily one meal a day, uh, and I do it more of like a blend between the warrior diet and one meal a day. So I maybe eat over the course of 3 hours or 2 hours, and
Okay,
that's that's um, that's like I have like my diet pretty optimized in terms of the nutrient density as well as the macronutrients. So I'm not restricting my protein, so to say,
sure.
and I'm not trying to either be very catabolic during daytime as well. So for example, the way I've overcome this limitation is I've added like a small protein shake during my workouts before I break my actual fast. So it essentially enables me to get some protein into my system to raise my amino acid levels, and therefore not like burn a bunch of muscle when I work out in a fasted state, because it is true that working out completely fasted is inherently more catabolic than if you were to work out with some protein in your system. So getting that protein shake kind of shields me against the potential catabolism that I would experience, and still enables me to kind of get some muscle growth and make progress.
Do you do that before the workout then, or after?
I do it like exactly during the workout. So
Oh, intra workout.
yeah, I warm up without the protein shake, but I start like zipping on it when I do some actual exercises.
So that doesn't break the fast.
Well, it does, in essence, it would, but it's also like I'm already working out and I'm already exercising, so my body's already like burning glycogen
Hmm.
and it's having like elevated blood sugar in my system. So that at that point, it doesn't really matter. And
Huh.
I've been already before I drink the protein shake, I've been already fasting for like 20 hours. So
Gotcha.
I don't I think it's not gonna like affect the processes that we mentioned. And at that point I don't really care either, because I've been already fasting for like 20 hours.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to ask you about. Is like how do you recommend doing like timing your workouts, especially if you like to do your workouts in the morning? That's what I've been getting a little bit stuck around. It's like, all right, if I want to work out in the morning, then I have to do it pretty much completely fasted. If I want to go to bed with food in my belly, which I usually do because I have trouble sleeping if I'm very hungry when I go to bed.
Yeah.
So it's like I've been doing it and I've done all right, but I know that my performance definitely does decrease if I work out completely fasted for sure.
Hmm. Well, in that case, if you do have like a later dinner, if you finish eating closer to bed, then I don't see like a really big problem working out fasted in the morning.
Mm,
You can safely, if you're coming from only like a 12-hour fast or even like a 14-hour fast, then working out fasted can be completely fine, because you
huh.
still have like you still have the food left in your system from the night before. So at that point, it's not like that big of a problem, and you can safely even fast for like up to maybe 2 hours after the workout without like seeing any negative side effects. But optimally, yeah, I would try to have the workout as close to the end of the fast as possible, so to say, so that you would want to work out and then break the fast maybe optimally like within an hour or two, to still feed your
Gotcha.
system and not to go like excessively catabolic afterwards.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Well, I have to play around with that and see how it works. Because normally, yeah, it's usually only about 10 hours or so after I've eaten, and so okay, I'll play around with
Yeah,
that.
and if you do feel substantially weaker and that you don't have any, like you see a decrease in performance, then again maybe adding some protein shake for the workout you can still like work out semi-fasted and without having like a bunch of food sitting in your stomach, and still get some benefits.
Yeah, I'm interested to see even if it's just an adaptation thing, because it's something that when I first started doing it, it felt terrible, and then after a few weeks, it's gotten easier and easier, and I'm wondering if it's just my body getting used to doing that, really. So I'll have to keep monitoring that. But another question I have for you is, like, what do you say to people who are like afraid of trying this out, like who are afraid of like going into starvation mode, who are, you know, worried about like being, you know, weak and dizzy and unable to focus and that kind of stuff, where, you know, that idea is out there that if you don't eat immediately, then, you know, if you don't eat on your regular cycle, then something bad's going to happen to you. What do you think of that?
Right. Well, it may be true. So that if you skip meals, that you get hypoglycemia and you get dizziness and you get really hungry. So part of the reason it happens is because of this situation that most people are in, that they've habituated themselves to do. Like they're used to being in this chronically fit state, and they're used to having their meals at specific times. So their body's kind of expecting it to happen, and therefore they experience hunger at these specific times. Whereas if they were to kind of change those habits, change their brain's plasticity, then eventually they would readjust and they would feel completely fine. And the brain is
That's
very
kind of what's
plastic.
happening to me then with my what I was doing then, right?
Yeah, like everything is a matter of adaptation, and everything is almost like a habit that the body is used to doing some things. And specifically the feeling of hunger as well as energy during a fast state, that's determined by your level of fat adaptation. So everyone is
Hmm.
carrying thousands and thousands of calories with us all the time in our body fat. Even if you're like pretty lean, you have thousands of calories with you. So the problem is never that you don't have energy. The problem is that how well
Hmm.
you can tap into it, how well you can access it. So because hunter gatherers, they had to go through days in some cases without food and still be able to perform. So they were very fat adapted. Their body was tapping in and out of ketosis, and whenever they weren't eating, then they were able to just burn their own body fat for fuel.
Hmm.
And when your body is burning its own body fat for fuel, then you can actually suppress your appetite. You can experience this mental clarity because your body is converting its own body fat into these ketones and giving yourself this enough amounts of energy. So in the modern world, we're just under adapted to ketosis, and we're not really fat adapted. So that's why exercise as well as fasting and even like being mindful of your carbohydrate intake, all of those things will increase your body's fat adaptation and kind of teach you to burn your own body fat and kind of go through periods or go through longer periods without eating at all.
Hmm. So when you say fat adaptation, that you mean the capacity to shift into pulling energy from our fat cells?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and so just by doing fasting regularly, you'll be training your body to get better at that, and working out
Yeah,
and
and
stuff.
yeah, exactly. Like it's like metabolic exercise
Hmm.
and teaching your body to switch fuel sources. So even if you're not doing like a keto diet, you can still gain some benefits of the fat adaptation from fasting if you do it consistently, so to say. So keto is just keeping yourself in this semi-fast state more consistently and for more often.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it's like ketosis. Then it's a lot of people are really into that because, in a way, it mimics some of the elements of fasting, right? Basically, it's like
Yeah.
body's running off of fat, but it's running off of fat that you eat, and then it just stays in that fat using mode even after you stop eating, right?
Yeah, exactly. When you're fasting, then your body goes into ketosis, and you can also mimic ketosis with nutrition, and you can be like in nutritional ketosis by eating a low carb keto diet. But yeah, the benefits are quite similar, but you wouldn't, you would still get some benefits from the fast as well, even if you're doing like a keto diet, because you can elevate the sirtuins and autophagy.
Awesome. So one last question on the fasting. What do you think of longer fasts, like going like, one day, like 24 hours, 36, 48, maybe like a 3-day, 4-day fast? Like, what do you think of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, those things, essentially what they would do is to just increase they would go into like a lot more deeper autophagy, and also longer fasts have been shown to increase or activate stem cells, which can, regenerate your old cells and become youthful again. So that's another like anti-aging type of thing that may happen. But it's also like a great, also like an easy tool to lose a bunch of weight really fast because you're not eating. But yeah, whether or not someone should do it depends on the situation as well as their goals. So if someone is trying to really maximize their muscle growth, then it's just going to be counterproductive to go for these longer fasts. Whereas someone who is, let's say, sedentary, or they're trying to burn some more body fat, then I don't see like a real problem for them for going these longer fasts, like beyond 24 hours and fasting for three days or something, because they don't have like a bunch of they don't have a high amounts of physical stress on their system, and they don't have like energy demands that is that high. For
Yeah.
them, that can be somewhat useful as a tool.
I know a lot of pretty fit and muscular guys, they still even do longer fasts, like just a few times a year, kind of like for health benefits. Sometimes, like, maybe they'll do like a 2-day fast once a month, or they'll do like a three-day fast or something, like once a quarter or something like that. I'm thinking of like, Tim Ferriss and Elliot Hulse and those kind of guys. They seem to be into doing that, and they still hold a pretty decent amount of muscle mass. Would you say that's a general strategy that you could pursue, even if you do want to, if you are concerned with strength and size and whatnot?
Yeah. Like I myself still do them like a few times a year. So far, I've done like maybe six 3-day fasts, and yeah, like at minimum, it would be a good idea. Like once a quarter would be to get some sort of a reset button, because the fasting also resets your immune system.
Huh.
These longer 72-hour fasts reset the immune system, and yeah, like trigger gut stem cell regeneration, and yeah, basically also just elevate autophagy to a higher degree. So it can be thought of like a some sort of a cleanse, or it's like a bad word, or misused word, like a detox or cleanse, but that's essentially that would happen if you do it like maybe every quarter of the year. You go for maybe a 48-hour fast or a 72-hour fast. Yeah, it depends on the person.
Okay. Awesome. So that's my main questions around fasting, and I really appreciate you enlightening me, because I haven't had the time to do a lot of research around it. There is some other things I was interested in asking about. Do you have a little more time?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So in terms of biohacking, one of the things that I'm always looking for is a way to get longer periods of mental clarity and focus. Like, my work is pretty much, I think about something hard and deep for hours at a time, and always trying to figure out a way that I could do more of that. So if you were going to be biohacking primarily from the standpoint of trying to increase your capacity to maintain focus and perform high level cognitive activity, what would you recommend that I would look at?
Mm, well, definitely, if you don't sleep well, then no amount of nootropics or biohacks is gonna help you. Like sleep is the best and the most effective nootropic or cognitive enhancer there is. So that's why I would try to put most of my effort on optimizing my sleep.
Hmm.
And for that, I would use like some form of blue blocking devices, whether that be these glasses that filter out the blue light in the evening, and on the laptop screens I would also install these filters that wouldn't start shooting this artificial light into my eyes, especially
Mm-hmm.
when I'm about to go to sleep, because that can just inhibit the production of your sleep hormones, and also just disrupts the circadian rhythm. So that's why the biggest effect I've seen is just using, let's say, blue blocking glasses in the evening before going to bed.
Hmm.
And that also just helps you to wind down mentally, because the blue light is like stimulating, and it's supposed to make you alert and more awake.
Okay. And if you have like, do those glasses have any advantage if you already have one of those, like, red light kind of filters or whatever on
Right.
your phone and computer?
Yeah, they would. Like the filters on the phones, the default filters tend to be only, pretty weak. They're not going to filter out all of the wavelengths, and there's still going to be some sneaking in. And
Huh.
also the flickering rate also affects this. So the glasses would also just essentially block out all the harmful wavelengths and also the flicker.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Well, I'll have to definitely look into getting some of those glasses. Now, I've always been someone who has like felt like they've needed like 9+ hours of sleep to really feel my best.
Mhm.
Are there people like that who that's just their natural state, or is there something that could likely be happening that maybe I could adjust or allow myself to get by on less sleep? Because I would love that. It's just every time I've tried it, it hasn't worked out super well for me.
Well, there are a few like genes that affect how much sleep you need, but it's also very much to do with the composition of the sleeping period, so to say. So I don't know if you use some sort of a sleep tracker, but looking at that can be useful for like determining whether or not you need to adjust your routines or something. uh, you know,
Hmm.
Usually, if you wake up throughout the entire night very frequently, then that can be a sign of like too much mental stress or the body being stuck in this sympathetic mode of arousal, as well as going not being able to fall asleep fast can also be a problem of that you go to bed at the wrong time. So you can adjust that a little bit, but all the the most critical part is trying to optimize the circadian rhythm and sticking to it as much as possible. So the natural circadian rhythm is that usually you wake up slightly earlier with the sunrise and go to bed maybe before midnight up, at least. I think that's the minimal time that you should want to be in bed.
Hmm.
And the morning sunlight and getting exposure to daylight quite frequently is also important for producing the melatonin, the sleep hormone. So if you're stuck indoors all the time, then your body may not have like the resources to fall asleep. And yeah, like if you have like too much energy as well, then you may find it difficult to fall asleep. So yeah, just exercising as well as getting fresh air and daylight, all those things that help you to sleep better.
Hmm. That's interesting. Okay. I think maybe the one thing I probably should do is just gather more data. And so if someone wanted to get into biohacking and they wanted to start gathering more data, like what do you use? Like one of those like Fitbit things? Like I don't know anything about all the stuff people are strapping to themselves these days.
Yeah, well, I'm using this ring, the Aura ring,
Huh.
and it's like sleep tracker. It measures the amount of sleep I get and how much time I spend in these different sleep stages,
Oh,
like
cool.
REM and deep sleep and those things. And then it's gonna give him like a score how well I slept, and measures my heart rate and those things. So I don't know, like this is a pretty all in one pretty good solution. It also tracks your steps. So I'm using this one, but there are like yeah different Fitbits and different sleep tracking devices. But the problem with those is that they tend to also emit Bluetooth and those things, which can actually decrease your sleep quality. So the Aura ring can be put on airplane mode. So that's why I use it. It's like pretty. It doesn't emit like these EMFs while I'm sleeping, and it's pretty convenient all in one. But in
Cool.
addition to that, maybe just paying attention to your caloric intake or macronutrient ratios is also like a good starting point. So like you don't have to be neurotic about it. You don't have to start weighing all your food. But I would like every person should have the ability to kind of look at a piece of food and know approximately how many calories and how many carbs, proteins, and fat does it have, because it's almost like a superpower. You can just look at a food and okay, this is what I'm getting, and this is the nutrients that I'm getting, and this is what I actually need. And then you can adjust your behavior. Like, okay, I don't know, like you eat out and you eat this meal, you realize that okay, it doesn't have enough protein. Therefore, I have to later in the day, if I have another meal, I'll have to like increase the protein intake or something, whatever it may be. It's almost like a superpower, and like knowledge is power, especially if you know how to apply it. So you can imagine someone who is trying to lose weight, they're overweight and they're on the borderline of being depressed, and they're like, why can't I lose weight? What's their
Right.
problem? Whereas if they were to actually quantify their food and measure it and look at it, then they would realize that they're just eating too many calories. So
Hmm.
the problem isn't that there's something wrong with the person, or that they're fat and that they're obese. The problem is that they don't have the knowledge or the information about how many calories that they're actually eating. So they're suffering because of almost ignorance. They're not suffering because of being obese or being wrong in some way. They're suffering because of not having the knowledge. And with biohacking, you're kind of essentially giving yourself the knowledge, and you're giving yourself this information.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you're talking about measuring and being able to do that kind of thing. One of the biggest blocks I run into a lot of times with getting people to modify their behavior is getting them to really gather the data. Like, are you tracking, your streak with this habit? Are you tracking how much time you're spending on task, being productive, whatever? Because if you don't gather any data, you can't really say whether you're succeeding or not, whether you need to make an adjustment and that sort of thing. And people don't want to do it. Like, I don't want to track my calories. I know if I did it, it would be very helpful, but just the thought of doing it is just terrible. So I'm just curious if you found any tips on helping break through that resistance to gathering measurement, really, to gather data. Because if you can get yourself into it and you can embrace it, then that unlocks, like you said, it's like a superpower. But there's a lot of resistance there for a lot of people around that.
Yeah, I think initially it's just out of habit that you don't want to do it, and it's hard to kind of remind yourself all the time that you need to do it or that you want to do it. But again, I think it has to be reframed in some way, that you have to remind yourself that, okay, this I'm doing this because of, again, wanting to develop this sort of superpower or wanting to reach a particular goal. So you have to always remind yourself why are you doing it. And of course, I don't really want, or I wouldn't recommend ever to measure everything and quantify everything. And you don't want to become dependent of the measuring either, because, imagine someone becoming so neurotic that they're literally being afraid of eating because they don't
Sure.
know how many calories it has.
Right.
Or
I don't have my
they're afraid.
tablespoon or my scale. I can't eat. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, like you don't want to take it to that end. You wanna develop an intuitive understanding about these things. But in order to develop that intuition, you need to teach it with some
Right.
objective measurements and data. So it's a habitual thing, and making sure that you also only measure the things that you need to measure. So let's say that would help you to reach a particular goal. So I don't, if you don't specifically have like a, I don't know, a bodybuilding contest, then you don't need to measure every gram of food that you eat. But it will be still a good idea to, like, every once in a while pay attention to it and acknowledge to yourself these kind of numbers to keep yourself on the line, so to say, and vice versa. I don't think someone needs to measure, let's say, like the amount of time they're spending on social media if they don't have a problem with it. They
Right.
would may want to measure it only if they feel that they're wasting time on too much on it, or that they're being kind of addicted to it in some shape or form. So for that person, they may want to measure it in order to just control their behavior a little bit. So it's a
Yeah.
matter of what your goals and what kind of measurements you need to do to reach those goals.
Right, right, and that's where I guess like coaches and good programming comes in. Is it helps you focus in on exactly what variables you need to focus on at any given point. Maybe for someone, the best thing they can do, especially if they're interested in maybe losing a little weight, getting a little more knowledge, is just track the amount of protein that they're getting in a day. Maybe they don't need to do everything else. And a lot of times, I think with this sort of thing is if you track for a period of time, then you like you said, you can develop this kind of intuitive sort of understanding, and then you can stop doing it, and then you can take it from there, kind of like
Yeah.
do it sort of ad hoc. But I think you've got
There has to be like a short-term commitment,
right.
regardless. You have to just commit to it, and if you don't commit to it, then that's fine. You may just find it more difficult to reach a goal. So if you measure, then it's gonna get managed, and therefore your progress will also be faster. So you're not gonna have like this randomness and cluelessness.
Right, right, exactly. So I think we're on the same page on that. Now, I pretty much got all my questions in. I really appreciate you sharing all of your knowledge here. Is there anything that you wanted to let my audience know about where to check you out? Anything, any programs or books or anything you got going on?
Well, yeah, like on all the social media platforms, Siim Land, and I've got YouTube videos, and I've got a podcast as well, Body Mind Empowerment with Siim Land, about biohacking. And yeah, like on my blog, siimland.com, there are a few like free ebooks about fasting and nutrition, so you can check it out.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I hope that you wish you the best on all your business endeavors and the growth of your channel and whatnot. So thank you. Most guys fail to build good habits because they're stuck in bad thought patterns. Until you recondition your brain to think new thoughts in the moments that matter, you'll keep ending up in the same old places over and over again. This is why I created the Metascript method. It's a free guide that will teach you 3 simple yet insanely powerful journaling techniques that, when practiced regularly, will reprogram your brain for near automatic success. I've read hundreds of client journals in my years as a professional coach, and I've identified exactly what you need to put down on the page if you want to create positive life changes that truly stick. And no, just endlessly writing about your feelings doesn't work. So if you want to learn my secret weapons of self-development, then click the link below and grab your free copy of the Metascript method now.